Liquidators are in talks with 20 replacement builders to help finish some of the 1,700 jobs left in limbo by the collapse of Porter Davis Homes. Australia's 12th largest home builder went under earlier this month, leaving unfinished properties in Victoria and Queensland. Joining me now live is Chief Economist for the Housing Institute Association, Tim Reardon. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. A pretty tough situation for hundreds of people who'd been building their dream homes. What can these home builders do?
Yes, it's certainly been a tough couple of years for home builders. With this Porter Davis incident, though, it's really a shadow of the problems the industry was facing last year. Rapid increase in material prices, longer build times meant that builders were carrying more cash or more liability over a longer period of time than what they typically do, and as a consequence, a number of them experienced cash flow problems. Almost all of them have traded through that cycle. We're in a different cycle, of course, now. Reserve Bank increasing the cash rate significantly. We're seeing the volume of work coming into the pipeline has slowed very quickly, particularly in Melbourne and in Sydney. And as a response, the industry is starting to slow down. So we're seeing build times starting to come down. We're seeing a number of building materials, key ones, particularly timber. A lot of builders at the moment are reporting a 20 to 30% decline in timber prices compared to the almost 100% increase in prices we saw last year. And so the combination of those forces should see that moving ahead, we're well past this particular insolvency problem. In fact, this one was a surprise to me. As I said, it's really just a shadow of what we saw of the challenges the industry had in 2022.
Look, it's a pretty tough situation facing the sector, as you just outlined. We know that liquidators have gone in when it comes to this situation, but will that incur additional costs for the sector?
So for every home, essentially in every state and territory now, there is homeowners warranty insurance, and that's intended to protect the consumer, not the builder, but the consumer in the event that the builder is dead, disappear, or insolvent. And it not being able to speak to this particular incident, but in the event that the liquidators have called in, that would clearly trigger that insolvency situation. And so those measures are designed to protect consumers in that event, to ensure that there is enough money to engage other builders to complete those projects. And so in those circumstances, there's three parties to a contract, typically, the three Bs, the bank, the builder, and the borrower. And of course, the borrower and the bank are very motivated to get through this process, and they have that insurance money to ensure that there's the additional cash to be able to get the project to completion. And that should be sufficient to see these homes continue. Of course, there's disruption for the customer, and of course there is some challenges in engaging additional workforce at this time, given that the number of homes under construction in Melbourne are almost double what they are in a typical cycle. But I imagine that as the Reserve Bank's rise in the cash rate continues to bite, and we see volume builders selling fewer homes over the course of the next 12 months, that there will be increased capacity within the industry to take on this work, and eventually these homes will reach completion.
Yeah, hopefully better late than never, that's for sure. You outlined why some home builders are certainly struggling at the moment, or have been for some time. What's the outlook then for this year for the building industry?
So as I mentioned, a record volume of homes under construction at the moment, but the volume of work entering the pipeline is very low. We've seen new home sales falling for almost 12 months now, and they're down to very low levels. We saw it bite particularly hard in Sydney in November, and in Melbourne in February. It hasn't flowed through to quite the same extent in other jurisdictions. And that's the point at which the amount of money banks are prepared to lend is lower, or for a new home construction, is lower than the price of an established home of similar standard. And that just sees the volume of work come off very quickly. And so we're seeing that at the moment. That leads us to a forecast which sees 2024 as the fewest number of new home starts since 2012. And we're seeing that in the official data already. Lending for the purchase and construction of a new home is currently at its lowest level since 2008. Now, typically that would be sufficient to drag the national economy into recession, but it's not going to happen in this cycle, for the reason that there is still that very large volume of work under construction. That's 2 years worth of homes. It's going to take 12 to 18 months to reach completion. And by the time we see this low number of starts coming through, these long and treacherous lags, we should be seeing a cut to the cash rate and new home building picking up on the other side, because the fundamentals are not broken. 3.5% unemployment, 3.5% economic growth and strong population growth. All of that should see demand for new homes continue. Of course, I've missed the other part of the industry, which is renovation work, which accounts for 20 to 30% of all subcontractor activity. And it remains at a record high. It has come off a little bit with the rise in the cash rate, but the nature of COVID, people working from home more, and of course, all of the storm damage that we saw last year means that that renovation activity is going to remain exceptionally strong, probably for the next few years.
And just based on that then, have you got any advice? I mean, what should you do before signing a building contract right now?
Well, I think at this point, we're in quite a different cycle to what we were. And from a builder's perspective, any moves to ensure that they're able to accommodate future price increases and contracts that builders have been engaging in for the past 18 months should have all reflected that we knew that we're going to see some very high price increases. And so at the moment, the homes that builders are completing should have a margin in them. And from a consumer perspective, if you're looking to build or renovate, then beginning the process now should see you getting on the ground at a time in 2024 when building activity is coming off and there should be increased competition for the provision of that building activity.
Tim Reardon, good to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Anytime.